Hi, I'm here today with Dr. Paula Alexander. I'm Mayor Deb, and we have a special guest here today who is joining us via Zoom, Mr. Alex Holstein. And Alex is an international security expert and co-author of Warfighter, The Story of an American Fighting Man. It was a best-selling memoir of the late Colonel Jesse Johnson, who is one of the most decorated special operations veterans in US history. Alex has also worked over 2 decades in the private intelligence sector, advising private and public sector clientele on issues that are pertinent to national security of the United States. And as though that wasn't enough of an accomplishment, he also holds a Master of Science in Russian and post-Soviet studies and completed his thesis on the Soviet KGB, which I find quite fascinating. And that'll be a whole other conversation someday. So thanks for joining us, Alex.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Yeah, but good to see you again, Alex. And
Good to see you, Dr. Paul.
it's always Paul for you, and it's good. I like the introduction by Mayor Deb because me and you go back a while, and I've always found you one of the most well-read, in tuned and informed people. I mean, all three of us here, because of what we've done, know certain people and at different levels. But sometimes in life you meet interesting people who bring a lot to the table. You bring a lot, and that's why when we came up with this approach, I said, well, somebody we need to have involved with the Alex. So you are here, and let's get going.
Yeah, let's get going.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, glad to be here.
So I think one of the biggest issues that we're faced with right now and over the past couple of years, and especially since the election is right around the corner, is the open border. And you two gentlemen, I think, have quite a vast understanding of that with your background and your work experience. So let's have a conversation about it.
Yeah, well, yeah, actually, I do. I lived in San Diego for about 10 years, off and on, probably about almost 15, well, 12, 15 years, between living in Los Angeles when I went to the University of Southern California, and then later on when I actually ran or was an ED a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away of the Republican Party of San Diego County, and dealt with this issue head on in election cycles, the presidential '04 as well as the recall 2003. And what was interesting when you look at it over the last 20 years is how long the issue was ignored by our leadership on both sides of the aisle, despite the terrible security risks, and not just the social issues and the social impact which we see happen, and the economic impact which we see happen from the mass unvetted migration that's occurred into the country, illegal migration, where you see an entire groups of people come in who are, have no way to sustain themselves. So our country or the state ends up sustaining them, which is unsustainable in and of itself. But on top of it, the huge security risks, which weren't addressed during a time, oddly, after we had been attacked in 9/11. And the argument at the time was, well, the people who infiltrated the country to conduct 9/11 didn't infiltrate it through our borders. Oh, okay, so let's wait until they do, and then we'll do something about it. It's always after a terrible catastrophe happens that we react rather than proact. And in national security and international security, and particularly with the border issue, you have to be proactive. And now we're pretty much 20 years too late on the proactive side of it. So now we're on a reactive footing at a time where our adversaries have realized this vulnerability and are openly exploiting it, whether it's Venezuela dumping its prisons, emptying its mental asylums into our country, or actual groups like Al Qaeda and ISIS, which, by the way, despite our killing of their leadership, are hardly defeated. And with our withdrawals from Afghanistan and our pending full withdrawal from Iraq, will rear their heads again, and believe me, are exploiting our border, as well as Hezbollah. Hezbollah, for a long time, I can tell you from sources inside the U.S. intelligence community, deep sources that are directly involved in counterterrorism, directly involved in counterterrorism near our border. Hezbollah, for a long time, has operated a mosque in Chiapas, Mexico. And in fact, FBI sources have told me as well that Islam is the fastest growing religion inside Mexico and a fanatical brand of it.
Yeah, well, I've heard, you've written quite extensively about this issue with the open border and the implications of what that means.
Well, I mean, listen, I think Alex is somebody who I consider a global expert, especially in his background training, particularly in the KGB and counterintelligence, counterterrorism. Look, today there was some articles that I was doing some research on where, to dovetail with what Alex just said, that since the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel, the viewers should know, without getting too involved in it, that I actually went to Israel about 3 weeks post the attack. I went there with a group of high-level Republicans and some Democrats who went there on what they call the fact-finding, or to bear witness. Anyway, we could talk about that in other talks. But the thing is, from the reporting now is that since October 7th, there are a lot of Mexicans, to dovetail with Alex, within South America who have converted to Islam, and even in America. So somehow or the other, something very strange has happened with our media, our Western media, that they have painted this picture and of this luxurious, this exquisite, mystical faith. But look, let's get straight to the point. I have background from the Middle East, Lebanon, and Syria. My great-grandparents came from the Middle East 100 years ago. They were Christians and they were escaping persecution from the Islamic regimes then. I was raised Christian, but I am for Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity, any religion, Islam, whatever you want to bring in front of me. I don't care if the person, black, white, yellow, whatever. Long as your religion or your faith doesn't want to harm me because of my belief in my faith. And I think the disconnect is that a lot of people in the West don't understand that we are dealing with a situation of radical Islam, extremist Salafi, Wahhabism Islam. Islam, that a type of Islam where you want to punish me or harm me because, as you say, I'm an infidel or a non-believer. President Trump said he's going to seal the border and mass deport. The problem we have right now is this, that in that open border, we have not just Latinos coming out of El Salvador, Guatemala, wherever, Mexico. We have radical Islamist jihadists leaving the Middle East, entering Mexico. They're shaving their beards. They're dressing with a flannel shirt, khaki pants. They're looking Latino. They're telling the border agents that they're 15. And these are men who are like 32. And they're coming in, getting Tombstone Data documents saying, my name is Rodrigo, when your real name is Mohammed. And you're putting on that document that you're 16 when you're 28. And you're allowed to come inside America. We don't know where you're going. We don't know your name, your proper name. We are checking you against databases that in those countries we're checking, the databases they're not even functional. So our border agents are spitting back where we found no flags. But of course you found no flags. because they have no database. They have nothing that you compare it against.
Yeah.
So we have a serious problem.
Yeah.
And I like what you said, Alex. America is in a lot of trouble because look at what happened.
And
go ahead.
And this is a very specific threat that we're talking about, and just one of the threats with the open border. And what you cited about having a false legend, as they call it, a false background, those are trained operatives that are coming in. Those are the people with mission directives. And it's not just Al-Qaeda, it's not just radical Salafists, it's also radical Shiites from the Hezbollah side as well, who've had a long time foothold in Latin America. Let's not forget that Hezbollah has conducted 32 years ago, I believe it's 32 and 30 years ago, they conducted respectively 2 attacks against, one against the Jewish Center and I believe Buenos Aires, and one against another major target, both in Latin America, both at the orders of Imad Bugnia, at the time the chief, basically the chief terrorist for Hezbollah, who was a longtime #1 wanted terrorist who we killed in Syria with a car bombing in 2008. But those attacks occurred because Hezbollah had the logistical capabilities to conduct them in Latin America or South America, and this was over 30 years ago. So they've had a foothold down there for a long time. As I said, they had they have the mosque in Chiapas, but also in a book that I was in, written by Shaker Jeffrey and Catherine Holstein, who wrote a book about the Yazidi in Iraq, who are a tribe of people in Iraq who were decimated, had a genocide conducted against them by ISIS, and after ISIS took over. They're not. They're their own religion. They have their own religion, but they're considered kafir, infidels by ISIS, and they were subject to slavery, and ISIS conducted a brutal genocide against them. And Shaker Jeffrey was a hero who ran an underground railroad to get Yazidi sex slaves, children and women who had been taken as slaves by ISIS out of Syria and Iraq. But what Shaker also documented in that book, and what I was directly involved with, is documented in that book, was trying to get the United States to look into intelligence that Shaker had gathered on ISIS obtaining blank passports from Turkey, a NATO ally. And Turkey has a specific passport that you can get into the EU without a visa. And these passports were being given by Turkish passport officials, corrupt Turkish immigration officials, to ISIS operatives. They were being sold. We passed this information on directly through sources to the FBI, as well as to the Joint Terrorism Task Force of the FBI, as well as to actually DevGru, the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, and CIA. I don't know what came of it, but that information was transmitted. So that was another thing that was going on. You were talking about fake papers. You outlined the Day of the Jackal scenario. Frederick Forsyth had, in the Day of the Jackal, has the assassin take the name of a dead child from a cemetery and go and obtain a birth certificate in that boy's name, and matches his age and all that. And yes, that still occurs to this day, with what you were talking about, Paul, with a person crossing in. And I had heard that story about the guy who says he's 32 and he's 15. He says his name's Rodrigo and he's from Honduras, and his name is Muhammad, and he's from he's from Lebanon or something like that, or Syria. So yeah, I mean, it is still going on and it's dangerous, but that's one very specific threat. We also have an influx of transnational gangs now, not just the Venezuelan gangs, but we've had the cartels coming across and getting their digs into our cities. And these are very dangerous groups. I mean, we call them narco terror groups. They're not just, criminal organizations, they're narco terror groups. MS-13 itself was listed by the Mueller FBI as being a national security threat to the United States when they reached a number of over 10,000. I'm sure they're much higher than 10,000 today. So they remain a national security threat.
Well, I think you mentioned MS Solinvio, that's Mara Salvatrucha, and 18th Street Gang. Those two gangs right
Yes.
now have infiltrated the United States, and now we are seeing that they are detected in at least 15 states. And the problem that the listener needs to understand is that most of these people are what we call Satanists, meaning when they commit a killing even, to complete their ritual, they have to cut out your heart. They have to do a bunch of bad things to even dead bodies. So we are not talking about just, these are depraved people. And the reality about it is, look at what has happened, and the listener needs to understand how serious this problem is. Some estimates are 20 million. If you include those that came in under Obama for his 8 years, we said there were 12 million. There are people coming in under Bush, even under Trump, though it was a trickle. So we have really good data to say it's probably around 40 million people in America who are illegal, number one. The Border Services said right now, of those people who came under Biden, the 20 million, they have 6 million they class as what they call gotaways. And a gotaway to the Border Services means whilst they were dealing with one group at one part of the fence, another group ran inside, they couldn't hold them. They don't know where they're now in America, and they don't know their names. And what is frightening is, in the group so far that they have interdicted and they have processed, they found 400 to 500 hardened core terrorists. Now, if you statistically apply that model, what we mean then is in those gotaways, we have 100 hardened terror cell terrorists within America, came up through the southern border. We don't know where they are, and we don't know what their names are. And that's a serious problem. And I argue that we are booked, not if, it is going to happen 100%, for a Bataclan terror-style attack that happened in France in 2015. And what those Syrian refugees and migrants who came up to Macedonia and all those places, up into Spain, up into France, what they did to those patrons in Bataclan, especially women, they reserved a level of depravity for the women nightclub members in Bataclan that even the forensic pathologists who went to the scene of the crime, because there were 135 killed, they ran out onto the street and vomited. It's in the press because they said they saw things done to human beings that they never thought possible. And that is what we face in America today.
Well, that's what happened in Israel on October 7th. We don't talk about that anymore. The press doesn't talk about it, but that's what happened to the Israelis on October 7th. Was the sexual brutality was something you can't imagine that would make the Nazis puke.
Yeah.
And the Nazis were vicious, but they just didn't live stream their crimes. They tried to hide them.
But Alex, not to sidetrack you, because you just raised an important point. We don't have to talk about the border. But what I think is baffling, and I mentioned this to somebody yesterday, somebody who's steep in the feminist movement. I told her straight. I said, where are you women in America? Where are you women and Me Too movement and the feminist movement and women standing up for the Israeli women still down in those caves? Because they have 110, 65 feet down in darkened caves. About half of them are women and some are children. Why are you not on the street? Where's Gloria Steinem? Where's Camilla Paglia and those feminist women? Where are those women today?
Yeah.
Where are they?
That is a great.
Well, interestingly, and that, go ahead, Deb. Sorry.
Well, that is a great question. And Paul and I have spoken about that on several occasions where, you have these women who are, running this Me Too movement, and these atrocities are happening, not just in this country, but nationwide. And everybody's gone silent. And have they just, is it not the right political side, perhaps? I don't know what that answer is because, I can't speak for all of those women, but It's very concerning, and I think, first and foremost, we have borders for a reason. Just bringing what you both were talking to down to, a 500 level. Borders are there for a reason, and I think it's up to our government to maintain those borders and make sure they're secure, and the people who live within those borders are safe and protected, and their families and their children are safe and protected.
100%. And Mayor Deb, you were the mayor of a thriving community in town, and you know what can disrupt that kind of safety and security on the very everyday level. It's not, we're talking about very high end, sort of dramatic, almost abstract attacks that are once in a lifetime, which is once too many in a lifetime, like a 9/11 style thing or a Bataclan thing, happens all too often. But in between that, on the everyday safety level, with an open border, you have criminals coming in who are committing everyday crimes that can be just as brutal as a Bataclan to the single person who's the victim of that crime. The 12-year-old girl who's riding her bike home from school and gets snatched by a repeat sex offender who's been kicked out of the country 3 times and comes back into the country and rapes that and murders that 12-year-old girl. That kind of thing. That's as bad to that family as if that little girl died in a Bataclan style terrorist attack. And that's going on every day in this country.
Well, I mean, Alex, you hit the nail on the head, because let's say New York City, in New York State, we have a situation now where the latest reports are that New York, 75% of all of the crimes committed now in New York State are by illegals and migrants, 75%. New York is now rated as the #1 rape capital. Rape, and it's happening, it's due to the illegals. These illegals, #1 rape capital of America. So quickly, what do you suggest Trump does? Because from my point of view, seal the border, I would say for a season, and a season could be as long as possible, and he must mass deport. As crazy as people say, well, that's going to take a lot, he has to do it.
Okay, so
I'm going to say, go ahead, Deborah.
You've got 3 minutes to answer Dr. Paul's question on what do you think you should do, and I know you can do it.
No, but I think we having a conversation, and because we want to be able to say, well, look, Trump is a funny guy. He would say something one day and soften it on the next day, but not in this case. This is not a wall. When he said concrete,
rhetoric is one thing. Rhetoric is one thing. Policy is another. We see too much of a we see too much of a divide between the two from politicians. But I think what any president needs to do that is in office, who's honest and true about wanting and truthful about wanting to and truly does want to secure the border, they need to secure it day one. And it doesn't mean, well, let's get more border patrol over the long term. Maybe, I mean, that could be a long-term strategy once it's secure, but I would use the military to secure it right now. And I don't mean that in terms of hurting migrants who are coming over. And by the way, I don't blame anyone for leaving Honduras or El Salvador or any of the places that they're leaving.
Alex,
any of the people who are coming
to work. Tune up on my border.
But
I have to take you in.
Paul, absolutely 100%. No, you're absolutely 100 right. No country does that. No country does that, or they've only just started doing it and they're regretting it. No, absolutely. You need vetted immigration, and I think everyone can tell that you weren't necessarily born in the States, Paul. So, most of the people I know who come here legally, like you, are also very staunch on making sure it stays legal, but that we enforce the law against illegal immigration, and we also secure our border beyond that. But I would use the military, and I would use it in the most humane way possible. I'd also do it to intervene in what is a human tragedy and what is a human rights tragedy in the exploitation of these migrants, particularly by the narco-terrorists, drug cartels that human traffic them. These people are being trafficked. They're not on some righteous journey that's
Yep.
wonderful. It's not Ellis Island. This is
Right.
not Ellis Island. This is a hell that they're
So-
being brought through.
And I think that that's where I want to cut this conversation, but I'd like to do a part two, because I think with your your
Sure.
last sentence that you said, I think there's a lot to unpack there, and I know you have a lot to add. Do you want to have?
Well, I just wanted to say this, right? That the problem we really have, even with the Trump administration and the prior Biden or past Democrats and Republicans, we have Democrats who really are using this with all the human tragedy as a vote getting issue. But we have Republicans,
Yes.
and I'm a staunch conservative, well, right of center. They're using the immigrants and the illegals for business. They want to pad up
Yeah.
the bottom line. So we have both parties doing wrong.